Hejin stared at her reflection in the convenience store window. The flickering light from the neon sign turned her black uniform into a canvas of dancing colors. She looked like any other 17-year-old girl working a late shift in Seoul. That was exactly what she wanted. A customer walked in, making the door chime ring. Hejin bowed slightly and said the same words she had said 1,000 times before. "Welcome to Star Mart." The middle-aged man barely looked at her as he walked to the drink section. 5 years ago, people would kneel in her presence. Now, they didn't even notice her. It was better this way. She watched the security cameras out of habit. Old instincts never really died. The front camera needed adjusting. It had a blind spot near the magazines. She made a mental note to tell her manager, then smiled at her own foolishness. A blind spot in a small store's security system didn't matter anymore. Not like the blind spots in the Imperial Palace that had almost cost her life. The customer brought his coffee to the counter. As Hejin scanned it, her hands moved automatically. These hands had once signed laws affecting billions of lives across 1,000 star systems. Now they beeped coffee cans and gave change. "That will be 2,501, she said. Something about her voice made the man look up. For a moment, he seemed confused, as if something wasn't quite right about the ordinary girl in front of him. Hejin knew that look. She had seen it before. Her teachers had that same expression when she spoke in class. There was something about her they couldn't quite place, a grace that didn't belong in a convenience store, a way of standing that spoke of years of royal posture training. The man shook his head slightly and handed over the money. Hejin gave him his change with a small bow, exactly the way her manager had taught her. Not too deep, not too shallow. A convenience store worker's bow, not an empress. When the man left, Hejin checked the time. 10:30 p.m., 1.5 hours until her shift ended. Then she would walk home to her small apartment, past the same streets she walked every day. She would check for surveillance drones, even though she hadn't seen any in months. She would make sure no one followed her, even though no one had tried in years. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old building. The door stuck sometimes, and the hot water was unreliable. But it was safe. Anonymous. The perfect hiding place for someone who used to live in a palace that covered half a continent. Hejin's phone buzzed. A message from her manager about tomorrow's schedule. She read it carefully, checking for any hidden codes or messages, then laughed quietly at herself. It was just a work schedule. Not everything was a secret message or a threat anymore. She looked out the store window at the quiet street. Across the road, a cat walked along a wall, its tail held high. A couple walked past, holding hands and laughing. A delivery rider zoomed by on an electric bike. This was her life now. Simple, normal, safe. But sometimes, when she looked up at the night sky and saw the stars twinkling between Seoul's tall buildings, she remembered. She remembered the view from her palace windows. Entire galaxies spread out before her. She remembered the weight of the crown, the responsibility of ruling an empire at age 12. Hejin shook her head and straightened her name tag. Those memories belonged to Empress Jia. She was Hejin now, the quiet girl who worked at Star Mart. At least, that's what she kept telling herself. 5 years earlier, 12-year-old Jia stood in the Great Hall of the Imperial Palace. Her black dress felt too tight around her neck. Thousands of eyes watched her every move. The crown felt heavy in her small hands. Her father's empty throne towered above her. Emperor Duwan had died just 3 days ago during peace talks with the rebels. Jia still couldn't believe he was gone. She had seen him that morning, drinking his favorite tea and promising to play games with her after the talks. "Your Majesty," Royal Advisor Kim Sun-ho whispered beside her. "It is time." Jia looked at the crowd. Government officials in their formal robes. Military leaders with their shining medals. Noble families wearing their house colors. All waiting to see if a 12-year-old girl could become their empress. She climbed the steps to the throne. Each step felt like climbing a mountain. Her father had taught her how to do this. Walk like you're floating on air, he had said, but keep your head high. You are the blood of emperors. At the top, Jaya turned to face the crowd. Sun Ho stood at the bottom of the steps, his kind face encouraging her. He had been like an uncle to her, always bringing her books and telling her stories about the empire's history. The emperor is dead, Jaya said, her voice clear and strong despite her tears. Long live the empress. The crowd knelt as one. The sound of thousands of people dropping to their knees echoed through the hall. Jia placed the crown on her head, just as she had practiced. That night, alone in her new rooms, Jaya cried for the first time since hearing about her father's death. The room still smelled like his favorite incense. His datapad still sat on the desk where he had left it. Someone knocked on the door. Enter, Jaya said, quickly wiping her eyes. It was Sun Ho. He carried a tray with hot chocolate, her favorite drink. I thought your majesty might need this, he said gently. Thank you. Jaya took the cup. Sun Ho, how am I going to do this? I don't know how to rule an empire. Sun Ho sat down beside her. Your father prepared you better than you know, and I will be here to help you, just as I helped him. Jaya nodded. Will you tell me what happened? At the peace talks, Sun Ho's face grew sad. The rebels had hidden weapons. They attacked during the meeting. Your father, he paused. Your father died protecting his people, as a true emperor should. Then there will be no peace. Peace must wait, your majesty. For now, we must show the empire that the throne is strong, that you are strong. Jaya straightened her back. She was crying inside, but her face became calm, like a frozen lake. This was another lesson from her father. An emperor's true face belongs only to themselves. What must I do first? She asked. Sun Ho smiled. Tomorrow, you will meet with the Imperial Council. They will test you, try to see if you are weak. But you are your father's daughter. Show them that the empire is in safe hands. Jaya nodded. She looked at her father's datapad. I want to read all the reports from the peace talks. Every detail. Of course, your majesty. I will have them sent to you right away. That night, Jaya read until her eyes hurt. She didn't know then that every report was fake, that Sun Ho had already begun his plan, that her father's tea that morning had been poisoned. She only knew that she was now Empress Jia, ruler of the stellar Concordat, protector of 1,000 worlds. And she was determined to make her father proud. Jia stood at the window of her palace, watching ships fly between the crystal towers of the capital. 3 years had passed since she became empress. She was 15 now, and her empire stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Your Majesty, a quiet voice said behind her. Captain Li Hawan reporting for duty. Jaya turned to see her new head of security. He was young for such an important job, maybe 25, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Welcome, Captain, Jaya said. I hope you like your new position. The last 5 guards quit because they couldn't keep up with me. Hawan's face stayed serious, but his eyes smiled a little. I read your file, Your Majesty. You sneaked out of the palace 12 times last month. 13 times, actually. Your guards missed one. This time, Hawan did smile. That won't happen again. Jaya walked to her desk, where hundreds of reports waited for her attention. Being empress meant endless reading and decisions. Today she had to approve new trade routes, review colony development plans, and sign peace treaties with 3 different star systems. The Outer Rim colonies need more food supplies, she said, reading one report. Their farms failed again. The noble families won't like sending more aid, Hawan said. They say it costs too much. Jaya looked up at him. Do you have family in the colonies, Captain? Yes, Your Majesty. My sister lives on New Buzan. Then you know the people there are not just numbers in a report. They are real people who need help. Jaya pressed her thumbprint on the aid approval form. The noble families can complain all they want. A soft chime filled the room. Sun Ho's face appeared on the big screen. Your Majesty, the Trade Guild representatives are here for their meeting. Send them in. Jaya straightened her formal robes. Stay close, Captain. Trade Guild meetings can get boring. I might try to escape. HFY moved to his position by the door. Not on my watch, Your Majesty. The Trade Guild members entered, bowing low. They were all old men in expensive clothes, looking down at Jaya like she was still a child. That was their first mistake. Gentlemen, Jaya said, let's talk about your shipping rates. They seem a bit high this year. Your Majesty, one man said smoothly, the rates reflect the dangers of space travel. Pirates, storms, rebel attacks. Interesting. Jaya touched her desk screen. Because according to Imperial Navy reports, pirate attacks are down 60%. Solar storms are at a 10-year low. And the rebels haven't attacked a trade ship in 8 months. The men shifted uncomfortably. Jaya continued, so either your reports are wrong, or you're lying to your Empress. Which is it? 2 hours later, the Trade Guild agreed to lower their rates by 30%. They left looking much less proud than when they arrived. Well done, Your Majesty, Sun Ho said from the screen. Your father would be proud. Jaya smiled, but something felt wrong. Maybe it was the way Sun Ho said father, or maybe it was the strange ships she had seen in the military reports, gathering at the edge of the Empire. Captain, she said quietly when Sun Ho's image disappeared, I need you to do something for me. But we can't talk here. HFY nodded. He understood. Even palace walls had ears. Would Your Majesty like to visit the garden? He asked. The night flowers are blooming. Jaya stood up. The garden had no cameras, no listening devices. It was the only safe place to talk. She didn't know it then, but that conversation would save her life in the coming days. The Imperial Palace was quiet at midnight. Jia sat in her private study, reading old reports about her father's death. Something wasn't right. The more she read, the more questions she had. Captain HFY stood by the door, alert as always. For the past week, he had helped her dig through secret files and classified documents. What they found made Jaya's stomach turn. Your Majesty, HFY said softly, look at this. He handed her a data chip. Jia plugged it into her secure reader. Her eyes widened as she read. These are orders to move ships away from the peace talks, she whispered. But who could order the fleet tow? The door slid open. Sun Ho walked in, his face calm as always, but his eyes were different now. Cold, like a snake's. I gave those orders, Sun Ho said, just like I ordered the poison in your father's tea. Jaya felt her world crack. Why? The Empire needed change. Your father was too soft, too interested in peace. Sun Ho's voice was still gentle, like when he used to bring her hot chocolate. He would have ruined everything we built. You killed him. Jaya's voice shook. You killed my father. For the good of the Empire. Sun Ho pulled out a small silver device. And now, my dear Jia, it's your turn. HFY moved fast. His body slammed into Sun Ho just as the silver device fired. A dart hit the wall where Jaya's head had been a second ago. Run, HFY shouted, fighting with Sun Ho. The emergency escape. Go. Alarms began to scream through the palace. Jia heard boots in the hallway. Soldiers, but whose? She couldn't trust anyone now. You can't run, Jia, Sun Ho called. He pushed HFY away. I've planned this for years. The palace is already mine. Jaya reached under her desk and pressed the hidden button her father had shown her long ago. For the darkest days, he had said. The wall behind her desk slid open, ancient emergency tunnels, built by the first emperors. Your Majesty, go. HFY pulled out his weapon. I'll hold them off. Come with me. Jaya grabbed his arm. Someone has to slow them down. HFY smiled at her. It has been an honor, Empress Jia. Tears ran down Jaya's face as she entered the tunnel. The last thing she saw was Ha-1 standing tall, facing the door as Sun Ho's soldiers rushed in. The wall closed behind her. In the darkness, Jaya ran. Her father's words echoed in her head. An emperor's true face belongs only to themselves. But now she cried openly, her tears falling in the dark. She had trusted Sun Ho. He had been like family. And all this time, the tunnel seemed endless. Jia ran until her legs ached. Behind her, she heard distant explosions. The palace, her home, was being torn apart. Finally, she reached a small round room deep underground. An ancient escape pod waited there, covered in dust. One last gift from her ancestors. As Jaya activated the pod, she made a promise. Someday, she would return. Someday, Sun Ho would pay for what he had done. The pod's door closed. Jaya felt it launch, carrying her away from everything she had ever known. She was no longer an empress. She was a survivor. The escape pod raced through secret tunnels built centuries ago. Jia held tight to her seat as the pod twisted and turned. Her hands shook, but her mind stayed clear. She had to survive. She had to remember her training. The pod screen showed a map of underground routes spreading like spider webs beneath the capital city. Red dots appeared on the screen. Sun Ho's forces searching for her, but they were looking in the wrong places. Emergency protocols activated, the pod's computer said. Destination: Earth. Do you confirm? Jaya blinked. Earth, the ancient home of humans, was just a legend now, a forgotten colony world that had dropped out of contact centuries ago. Perfect. Confirmed, Jaya said. The pod shot forward faster. Behind her, explosions rocked the tunnels. They were trying to collapse the escape routes. But they were too late. The pod was already entering the planet's upper transport tubes, the secret highways that connected the stars. Jaya pulled out her emergency kit. Inside was everything she needed for a new life. Identity papers, credits, and a small device that could change her appearance slightly. Enough to hide, but not enough to trigger security scans. Warning, the computer said. Pursuit ships detected. Through the pod's window, Jaya saw military ships racing after her. They were far behind, but they were faster than her small pod. Computer, activate the stealth systems, Jaya ordered. Stealth systems offline. Power reserves at 40%. Jaya's heart beat faster. She needed a new plan. Her father's voice came to her mind. Sometimes the best path forward is backward. Computer, show me all nearby gravity wells. A map appeared. Jaya smiled. There was a small black hole just off her route. Usually, ships stayed far away from black holes. But right now, that's exactly what she needed. New course, Jaya said. Take us close to the black hole. The pod turned. The pursuit ships followed. Jaya watched the distance meter carefully. The black hole's pull grew stronger. Warning lights flashed across the pod's controls. Now, Jia shouted. Full power to engines. Course changed to Earth. The pod shot forward, using the black hole's gravity like a slingshot. Behind her, the pursuit ships weren't ready for the turn. They had to fall back or risk being pulled into the black hole. Jaya watched them disappear from her screens. She had done it. She was free. But freedom felt hollow. She thought of Captain Ha-1, fighting to save her, of her father, killed by someone he trusted, of her people, now under Sun Ho's control. Approaching Earth orbit, the computer announced hours later, please prepare for atmospheric entry. Jaya looked down at the blue planet below. Somewhere down there, she would start a new life, become someone else. The pod landed in a forest outside a city called Seoul. As soon as Jaya stepped out, the pod self-destructed, leaving no trace. She walked through the dark forest, following the glow of city lights. Her royal clothes were gone, replaced by simple earth fashion from the emergency kit. The appearance-changing device had made her look slightly different. Nothing big, just enough to hide. By morning, she reached the city. Empress Jiao was gone. In her place stood He Jin, a quiet girl with no past. As the sun rose over Seoul, He Jin joined the crowd of people heading to work. She was just another face in the crowd, just like she needed to be. Park Min-ki sat in his small hotel room in Seoul, studying the data on his screens. 5 years of searching had led him here, to this forgotten corner of space called Earth. As Imperial Enforcer, he had one job: find the missing Empress. He touched a screen, bringing up a map of the city. Red dots marked places where he had detected tiny traces of Imperial technology. Most were false alarms, old space junk that had fallen to Earth centuries ago. But one signal was different. 2 days ago, his scanners had picked up a faint energy pattern matching Imperial security protocols. Someone in this city knew how to shield themselves the way Imperial guards were trained to do. Min-ki looked out his window at the streets below. Somewhere out there, a girl who should be 20 years old now was hiding. A girl who had once ruled 1,000 worlds. His communicator beeped. "Report," a cold voice said. "Sunho." "Nothing concrete yet," Min-ki answered. "But I'm getting closer." "You've said that for 5 years." Sunho's voice was sharp. "The people are starting to remember her kindness. There are whispers of rebellion. Find her." The communicator went dark. Min-ki stood up and put on his coat. Time to check another signal. At a small convenience store called Star Mart, his scanner picked up something strange. The security cameras were positioned exactly like Imperial guard posts. Most people wouldn't notice, but Min-ki had trained for years to spot these patterns. He walked in, pretending to shop. A young girl worked behind the counter. She bowed politely when he entered. Something about her movement caught his eye. It was too perfect, too practiced. Min-ki bought a coffee and watched her from the corner of the store. The way she stood, the way she moved her hands, it all screamed of Imperial court training. But it was her eyes that gave her away. They constantly scanned the store, checking exits, watching for threats, just like he had been trained to do. Outside, Min-ki sent up a small drone to watch the store. When the girl's shift ended, she walked home alone. She took a different route than yesterday, doubling back twice to check for followers. Another Imperial security trick. Min-ki smiled. After 5 years, he had finally found her. Empress Jia, now calling herself He Jin. But something bothered him. The reports he had found in the Imperial archives, the ones about the night the Empress disappeared, they didn't match Sunho's official story. Min-ki had been investigating corruption in the Empire for years. He had seen how Sunho's new laws hurt ordinary people, how the Empire had changed from a force of peace to one of fear. He watched He Jin through the drone's camera as she made dinner in her small apartment. She looked lonely, but peaceful. Not like the spoiled princess Sunho had described. Not like someone who had abandoned her people. Min-ki made a decision. Tomorrow, he would talk to her. Not to arrest her, but to warn her. Because his investigation had uncovered something else. Sunho was planning something big. Something that would destroy what was left of the Empire. And maybe, just maybe, the girl in that small apartment was the only one who could stop it. Min-ki turned off his drone and walked back to his hotel. Tomorrow would change everything. He just hoped he was making the right choice. He Jin knew someone was following her before she saw him. Years of training made her body tense, ready to run. But she kept walking normally, her hands in her coat pockets. The man behind her was good. Very good. He matched her pace perfectly, staying just far enough back to seem natural. If she hadn't been trained by the best Imperial guards, she might have missed him. She turned down a quiet street. It was time to face this. She had been running for 5 years. Maybe that was long enough. "You can come out now," He Jin said without turning around. "You're from the Empire, aren't you?" Park Min-ki stepped out of the shadows. "Imperial Enforcer Park Min-ki, Your Majesty." He Jin turned to face him. He didn't have his weapon drawn. "Interesting. I'm not Your Majesty anymore," she said. Just Hojin. Are you here to kill me or take me back? Neither. Min-Ki pulled out a small device and pressed a button. A shield of static rose around them, blocking any listening devices. I'm here to warn you. Hojin raised an eyebrow. This was not what she expected. Sun Ho is planning something. Min-Ki continued. He's building a weapon, something that can destroy entire star systems. He plans to use it on any worlds that resist his rule. Hojin felt cold. How do you know this? I've been investigating him for years. Ever since. Min-Ki hesitated. Ever since I found evidence that he killed your father. I know he killed my father. Hojin's voice was hard. I saw the proof right before he tried to kill me too. The empire is falling apart, Min-Ki said. Sun Ho's rules are too harsh. People are suffering. There are rebellions starting in the outer systems, but this weapon will kill millions. Hojin looked up at the night sky. Somewhere up there, beyond Earth's peaceful atmosphere, her people were suffering. Why are you telling me this? She asked. You're supposed to capture me. Because I've seen your records, the laws you made, the people you helped. You were a good empress, maybe the best we ever had. Min-Ki's eyes were serious. And right now, you might be the only one who can stop him. Hojin turned away. Her quiet life flashed before her eyes. Her small apartment, her job at the store, the peace she had found here on Earth. There's a resistance, Min-Ki said softly. Noble families who remember how things were. Military commanders who hate what the empire has become. They're waiting for a sign. For hope. For me. Hojin whispered. Yes. Hojin closed her eyes. She thought of Captain Hawan, dying to save her. Of her father, poisoned for wanting peace. Of all the people in the empire who had believed in her. If I help you, she said, I can never come back here. Never be just Hojin again. No, Min-Ki agreed, but you could be something better, something the empire desperately needs. Hojin opened her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was different, stronger, the voice of someone who had ruled 1,000 worlds. Tell me about this resistance, Empress Jaya said. In her small apartment, Jaya packed 5 years of life into one bag. Her star-marked uniform went into the trash. She wouldn't need it anymore. Min-Ki waited by the window, watching for danger. The resistance has a ship waiting outside the city, he said. We leave at dawn. Jaya touched the worn datapad on her table. For 5 years, she had used it to watch news from the empire, always in secret. She had seen her people suffer under Sun Ho's cruel laws. Before we go, she said, I need to send a message. Min-Ki looked worried. Any transmission could be traced. Trust me. Jaya sat at her small desk. Her fingers moved quickly over the datapad. When I was 12, I created a secret way to talk to people across the empire. Something not even Sun Ho knows about. She typed in an old code, one she had made up during boring court meetings. The message would look like normal space traffic data, but hidden inside were words that would give people hope. To all who remember the old ways, she wrote, the light returns at dawn. Jaya sent the message through 100 different routes. It would bounce between planets and stations, impossible to trace. By tomorrow, her loyal supporters would know she was coming back. Ready, she said, standing up. They left the apartment quietly. The streets were dark and empty. Jaya looked back one last time at the building that had been her home. At her windows, dark now like closed eyes. Goodbye, Hojin, she whispered. They drove out of the city in Min-Ki's car. Jia watched Seoul's lights fade behind them. The car climbed into the mountains where the resistance ship waited. Tell me about our allies, Jaya said. Min-Ki handed her a small screen. Admiral Yang leads the 3rd Fleet. She never believed Sun Ho's lies about you. General Kang commands troops in the Outer Rim. And Lady Kim still controls the trade routes. Lady Kim, Jaya smiled. The same one who argued with me about shipping rates. She says you were right. The lower rates helped everyone. Min-Ki looked at her. They all remember how you ruled, Your Majesty, with wisdom and kindness. The car stopped in a dark forest. Above them, stars peeked through the trees. Somewhere up there, Sun Ho sat in her father's palace, playing with his terrible new weapon. A shape appeared in the sky, the resistance ship, coming to pick them up. Jia straightened her back, remembering her royal posture. There's something else you should know, Min-Ki said quietly. Captain Li Hao-won. He survived. Jia's heart stopped. What? Sun Ho kept him prisoner, trying to make him reveal where you went. But he never broke. The resistance freed him 2 months ago. Tears filled Jia's eyes. Her loyal guard, alive after all these years. She wiped the tears away quickly. An empress couldn't cry now. There would be time for tears later. The ship landed silently in the forest. Its door opened, spilling light onto the ground. Jia took a deep breath and walked forward. She wasn't running away this time. She was running toward something, toward her destiny, toward justice. The empire needed its empress back, and this time, she was ready. The imperial palace looked different now. The warm golden lights were gone, replaced by harsh white beams. Armed guards stood everywhere, watching the crowds with cold eyes. But Jia wasn't watching the palace. She was watching the people. They moved quickly, heads down, afraid to look up. This wasn't the empire she remembered. Ready? Min-Ki asked beside her. They wore simple worker uniforms, perfect disguises for entering the palace. Jia nodded. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her face changed just enough by the device to pass security. In her pocket, she felt the small disc that would shut down Sun Ho's weapon. They passed through security easily. Jia's heart beat faster as they walked the familiar halls. Here was where she used to play as a child. There was where she had held her first court meeting. Empress, a whispered voice said. Jia turned. An old cleaning woman stared at her with wide eyes. For a moment, Jia's heart stopped. Then she saw the woman smile. We knew you would return, the woman whispered. She pressed something into Jia's hand, a small pin with the imperial flower. Word spread through the palace like fire. Servants smiled as she passed. Guards looked away, pretending not to see her. They were all waiting, Jia realized. Waiting for her. They reached the main control room. Captain Hao-won waited there, older now, but still standing tall. Your Majesty, he said, bowing. The weapon controls are through there. And so is Sun Ho. Jia hugged him quickly. Thank you for surviving, she whispered. Thank you for coming back, he answered. Jia straightened her back and walked into the control room. Sun Ho stood at the window, looking out at the city. I wondered when you would return, he said without turning. Still playing the hero, Jia. No, Jia said. Still being an empress. Sun Ho turned. He looked older, harder. You were never meant to rule. You were too soft, too kind. The empire needs strength. The empire needs hope. Jia stepped forward. Look out there, Sun Ho. Look at what you've done to our people. Is this the strength you wanted? I built this, Sun Ho shouted. Everything your father would have thrown away, I saved. My father wanted peace, Jia said quietly. And so do I. She pressed the disc into the control panel. Alarms began to sound as the weapon system shut down. What have you done? Sun Ho reached for his weapon. But he was too slow. Palace guards rushed in, led by Hao-won. Not Sun Ho's guards anymore. Her guards. The people remember, Jia said as they took Sun Ho away. They remember kindness. They remember hope. And they remember their true empress. Later, standing on the palace balcony, Jia looked out at the cheering crowds. The harsh lights were gone. The golden glow had returned. What now, Your Majesty? Min-Ki asked. Jia touched the imperial flower pin. Now we rebuild. Not an empire of fear, but one of peace, the way my father dreamed. She smiled at the stars above. Somewhere up there, Earth spun quietly in space, a good place to hide, but not a good place to live. Not when her people needed her. Jaya straightened her crown. She was home, and this time, she would stay. The end.